Hello, welcome to Cataclysm University course number 30. My name is Vormithrax, I'll be your instructor, and in this course we're going to be discussing the crafting system. We're going to be covering the basics of the crafting system. It's kind of an intro for newer players, and it may contain information more advanced players weren't aware of, but I want to go over the basics of the crafting system, the requirements that are necessary to meet in order to craft successfully, and some of the interface and commands available to players. So the crafting system in Cataclysm is incredibly important. It's very, very useful. You need to know how to craft, cook, get ammo, weapons, armor, all sorts of stuff. It's a very integral part of the game system. Now, I'm going to be using my tutorial series character for this course. That's him in the middle, right there. And he's a fairly advanced character, but he's got access to enough stuff that he's a useful test subject for this course. Alright, we're inside my Apocalypse Deathmobile mobile fortress type thing, and I've got raw materials, recipe books, crafting stations, and such all within reach, so he's going to be a good demonstration subject. So, in order to craft in Cataclysm, you use the crafting menu. That's done via Shift 7 on the keyboard and or the ampersand key. Here is the crafting menu. First I want to talk about how to move around within the menu, and that is done primarily through the tab key and the arrow keys. So you can see across the top of the screen we have various major categories: weapon, ammo, food, chem, electronic, armor, and other. And then within each of those major categories you have subcategories that you can narrow your recipe search down by. So for weapon, we've got all the items in the weapon category, or we can narrow it down to just bashing weapons, just cutting weapons, piercing, ranged, etc. So that is done via the arrow keys, left and right, to move back and forth between the sub keys, and then tab and shift tab will move back and forth between the major categories. And finally, the up and down arrow will choose a specific recipe within whichever major and subcategory you've got selected. One other choice you can do, by the way, is you can search for a specific recipe if you use the / key on the keyboard. That's the same as on the question mark key. You'll be able to use that, and that will bring up a search menu with various parameters you can set. I'm not going to go into exactly how to do all this, but it's here and available for you. You can search for a lot of different types of things, either a specific item or specific type of item, qualities of tools, and so on. A lot of really cool stuff in here. Another course in the future will probably cover this. But for now, if I just wanted to look up survival gear, for example, I could type in the word survival, and it's going to show me just items within that category that meet that particular entry. If I go back to the main menu here, and then bring up the advanced key again, there we go, survival knife and survival marker. And I'm actually looking for survivor versus survival. So that's what I was curious about. So if I type in survivor instead of survival, I get a much bigger list. So everything that has the word survivor in it is now available for me to search through. So if you got a specific recipe you know you're looking for, just use that / key in order to go find it specifically instead of tabbing around. Okay, so that's how you move around within the menu. Now what's it showing us in particular? Well, let me move to a little more narrow category here. This one will do. Okay, so we're looking at the armor category, the arms subcategory, and it's listing all of the different recipes we have access to. Now, which recipes we have access to is controlled by two major things. First, the skill levels I've acquired in the various skills in the game. Those would be skills like fabrication, cooking, tailoring, things like that. As you raise your skill level, you will automatically learn how to craft various items in the game. Now, not all recipes are going to be available through this method. Some recipes are restricted to book recipes only. No matter how high you get your skills, you will never know how to craft those items without finding specific books. So always be on the lookout for books that you have not yet encountered, and make sure to bring those back to your crafting area. Now, the books you have access to need to be within your crafting range or crafting radius, and that's 6 squares with line of sight to that location in order for you to be able to access the recipes within that book. So always keep your raw materials and your recipe books nearby your crafting tools and machines in order to be able to craft successfully. There's a lot of different requirements for crafting. We're going to cover all those here in just a bit. But just be aware that you want to keep recipe books very close to your recipes or your materials and your tools in order to be able to craft successfully. So, taking a look at this section here, we are seeing all of the armor recipes that I have access to, and they're divided into lightly colored lines and then darker colored lines. The difference here is I meet all of the requirements to successfully craft the lightly colored items, but I am missing some critical item, tool, or skill in order to craft these darker colored items. And the game helpfully color codes this middle section to tell you what you're missing in order to craft. Just look for anything in red. So, for example, for steel arm guards, there are 3 different sections within this information you need to know about. There's a skills used. It requires the fabrication skill with a difficulty of 7, and my current skill level is 10, meaning I exceed the difficulty level. It'll also give you information like time to craft, whether it can be craftable in the dark, which is kind of a new category, but it's impossible to craft this in the dark. Apparently there are some items that can be crafted in the dark. I'm not used to looking for this, but it is possible apparently. And then finally, you have a tools required section and a components required section. Now, realize these have to be within your crafting and sight range to be able to access these items. So when it says tools required, these indicators here show different categories or sections that you have to meet. So within this one section, we have to have one tool with hammering of 3 or more, which we do meet because it's green. We have to have access to a tool with chiseling of 3 or more. We meet that. A pair of metal tongs, an anvil, a swage and die set, and finally an electric forge. And you'll notice this has some in gray and some in green. I meet the ones in green. I do not meet the ones in gray. Now, you see the word or separating these. So I can either use an electric forge with 100 charges, or a charcoal forge with 100, or an acetylene torch with 20. I currently have these 2 available and within range and with enough charges. That's why they're green, and it will let me pick which of these I'd like to use once I actually try to craft this item. And that's pretty much the difference. So everything is in green in that section. At least one of the ore items is in green, so we meet the requirements. And then for components required, we have access to those as well. So for this line of info, we need either a lump of steel, quantity 6, or we can use chunks of steel, quantity 24. We have both within range, and it'll once again ask us which we want to use. And then we don't have leather pelts, we don't have a tan pelt, but we do have 6 leather patches, and we do not have tan hide. So I meet at least one of the ore requirements in this line or section as well. Because of that, we meet all the requirements. It is in light color. If I move down to the chainmail sleeves, though, all of a sudden a bunch of red text pops out at me, and you can see exactly what you're missing. So if you really want or need those chainmail sleeves, you're just going to have to make sure you can meet these requirements. Go out and find yourself some pliers or a multi-tool, and then find 3 chainmail sheets, chain link, and then this one I actually meet because we've got the 6 leather patches. So that's the important part, and it's the way that you can figure out how you can build things. Now, another thing I want to point out is it will list recipes in order of most difficult at the top to less difficult as you go down the list, and then it resets that rating once you hit the next section, meaning all the light colored items, if I start at the top, it's showing a difficulty of 7, difficulty of 4, difficulty of 3, difficulty of 2, and then as soon as you jump to the next area, down to difficulty 7, and then it'll go down from there again. This is important when you're trying to find recipes that you can craft with the highest difficulty to gain skills and such. Just realize that it resets the high to low rating for each of those sections. Okay, so we know how to move around within the message or the recipe groups. We know how to pick a particular recipe. You understand the color coding differences here and here. Be aware, like I said, that you got to have things within certain ranges, so make sure that you've got all your materials close to hand, you've got all your tools close to hand, you have your recipe books close to hand. As long as you meet all that, then you should be able to craft a fair number of recipes. Now, you do have to have light in order to craft, generally, so that could be any kind of light source, really, as long as it's close enough. You can be holding a lantern or a flashlight. You can have the lights from the vehicle turned on. Your choice, but as always, be careful with light being generated at night. It's very easy to see unless it's enclosed. Within an enclosed room or vehicle and such. Zombies outside might spot it and come calling. So, that's the next thing I want to talk about, and that is batches and interrupted batches. So when you're crafting, if you're crafting a large number of something, let's say for example I wanted to craft up a large number of salts. I could use the batch key, which is the B key on the keyboard. You just select your recipe, press B for batch, and then you'll get this list. You can craft up to a maximum of 20. Again, if you don't meet some kind of a requirement, it will color code this list. Anything you can meet the full requirements up to will be in light color. Anything you're missing requirements for will then gray out. So it might split this list based on maybe I don't have enough lye powder to do a full group of 20, but I might have 11. And it'll separate the color coding so you know exactly how many you can make. Once you pick that, you just press the enter key and it will then attempt to craft that recipe for you. You might have to pick which of the separate requirements or materials that you need if they're separated by ore, like it'll ask me if I want to use lye powder or the bleach I have available for this one. But then it'll try to craft that. So it will save you a lot of hassle by using the batch key. You won't have to over and over and over again keep running through those menus to pick the selector. So do take advantage of the batch key as needed. Now you'll notice if I try to craft up 20 batches of salt, it's going to take 16 hours to complete that. So if I do one batch, it's 48 minutes. If I do 20 batches, it's 16 hours. So be very careful to recognize how long it's going to take to craft a large batch of items. It's important for whether you're going to fall asleep, if you're dead tired. It's important for if you're already super hungry or dehydrated. You don't want to start a massive long crafting session right before you try to do something like that. So just be careful to notice how long the batch is going to take whenever you try to do this, and set up your game area, meaning make sure you're not going to get visited by zombies and so on when you're trying to do large batches. Now, if you start a large, long batch and you're interrupted in the middle of it, it is possible to complete the crafting once you have resolved whatever problem is occurring. So the most common example of this is you start an 8-hour batch time. 5 hours into it, some zombie decides to come visit you and is about to attack you. You get the little safe mode warning indicator that something's approaching. You can say yes to stop crafting and to deal with that item, or that zombie. Once you've completed clearing the area and you're no longer going to be interrupted, you can restart or continue the batch. You do that through the minus key on your keyboard. Now the minus key in the options for key bindings will say that it repeats the last recipe, but it also essentially completes whatever recipe you were already working on. So if you're 5 hours into an 8-hour crafting, it's really, really annoying if that 5 hours just disappeared and you couldn't get it back again. So by hitting the minus key, you will be able to continue crafting that particular recipe where you left off. You don't lose the 5 hours. So just press the minus key once things are clear again, and it will finish crafting whatever you were working on. And then once you've done that, if you press minus again after that, it will restart that same recipe from scratch again. So that's a way of repeating the last thing that you crafted from there. It'll either continue an interrupted craft, or it will allow you to repeat a previous craft. So those are pretty much the hotkeys that are involved in crafting. And a couple other things I wanted to mention. Containers for liquids. So if you're going to craft anything involving a liquid, you have to be careful to make sure you have containers nearby to hold that liquid once the crafting is completed. So think ahead anytime you're crafting. For example, the most common one would be your boiling water for clean water. You've got to have some kind of a liquid container nearby in order to hold that crafting once you're done. So especially if you're doing large amounts, a gallon container can hold 15 units. So that's kind of an important one because that's fairly common. Just realize that don't craft 20 units if you've only got a single gallon container nearby, unless you've got the ability to drink that leftover right away. So let me do an example. So if I go bring up food, go to the drink section, and then go find clean water, well, let's just type in the word clean. So clean water, I need just dirty water, which I don't have enough of in either place, so I can't actually craft clean water currently. So I'm not going to worry about that, but just realize a gallon container will hold 15, but you've got to have some kind of container for liquid. So make sure you have plastic bottles, glass bottles, 2 liters, 60-liter tanks, jerry cans, pretty much anything, but you've got to have something to store that liquid in. So do be careful to double check that. So that's the basics of the crafting system. Shift 7 or the ampersand key to bring up the list. You can sort the categories however you would like. You can use the / key to search for a specific recipe. Keep your recipe books nearby. Keep your tools nearby, your raw materials nearby. Understand the color coding system for what it's going to show you and help you understanding what you're missing in order to craft something. That's pretty much the basics. There is a little bit more in regards to NPCs helping you out. NPCs, if they have skill in whatever skill is being used to craft, if they're nearby, they can actually help you and speed up the crafting process. So that's another thing to be aware of. But I think that will cover most of the crafting system. If you have any questions about crafting beyond this, feel free to leave comments down below or visit me on my Discord channel, and I or any of the other experts that we have habiting the Discord channel will be happy to answer questions or help out, but I think that will cover it. So thanks for watching the course. Hope you found the information helpful. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you have a great day. Stay safe out there in the Cataclysm. Bye-bye.